All right. And now I'd like to bring to the screen Nadine Krefetz, who is a streaming media contributing editor, as well as a consultant for her own consultancy, Reality Software. Nadine, welcome.
Thank you very much, Eric. Good to see you.
You as well. And of course, Jared Wilichinsky from Paramount. And without further ado, I am going to hand it over to Nadine to start the discussion with Jay about connecting ad tech at Paramount.
Okay. Well, okay. The funny thing is that Jared, first I was going to have you do a commercial about yourself, but I want to say something which he doesn't even know I'm going to say. So I don't normally give out compliments to people, but Jared is running the part of the business that is so vital to keeping streaming going that I think the conversation we're going to have today is going to be incredibly important. He's got a bit of a deck to go through first, and then we're going to follow up with some questions, both from me as well as the audience. Now, Jared, what I normally do is let people kind of get in touch through LinkedIn. And I know you're going to be overwhelmed with people, but I'm saying get in touch with Jared through LinkedIn if you want to connect and find out more. But Jared, let's go and start your presentation, and we'll come back later and do some questions.
Okay, great. Thanks for having me again. And I can't say that Jay's lead in on some of the elements of what we do in the ad tech space is perfectly aligned with some of the stuff I have on my deck. So perfect timing. So all right, let me show off my Zoom skills, and off we go. And I'll be somewhat quick on this because I know.
Okay, and I'll be back
to ping pong on questions and answers. So slideshow. All right. Perfect. Okay. So we're going to talk about ad tech at Paramount today, and kind of help transition from Jay's overarching some of the things he's talked about into kind of some real life elements of what we do at Paramount, and kind of how we think about our inventory, our content, and kind of a high level sales approach, which is called IQ. So off we go. Okay, so just so everyone is aware, the Paramount portfolio is extremely broad. We have all of our traditional TV brands, all stem from linear. You have CBS, Comedy Central, Paramount Network, BET, MTV. I don't have to read logos to everyone, but these are all your traditional TV channels. They all have a digital presence. Some of it is free, like CBS, because it's a broadcast channel. All the cable channels, go into the TV authentication path for digital consumption, whether it's on-site, on our owned and operated, or off-site in our distribution endpoints, which basically you can't touch the internet without having Paramount content show up one way or another. And then we also have our our streaming group, which are headlined with Paramount Plus and Pluto. Paramount Plus, it used to be kind of CBS All Access back in the day. We've been doing the SVOD model for a while, and I think Eric, you opened it up as well, as in terms of we've always had a subscription model, and we always have provided users a choice in that model. Kind of a lighter ad load or a ad-free experience, and there's two different prices. And we empower our end users and fans to make a choice on what works best for them. That's Paramount Plus side of the house, and then Pluto TV, one of the original fast platforms, and if not the biggest, especially in which case that is all free ad supported video. There's a lot of Paramount content on there, but there's a ton of third-party providers where we act as a distributor, and that is fully ad supported at this time. So that's a well-rounded picture of the ecosystem to some extent, from free to SVOD to kind of the TV side of the house. All right, so kind of high level in terms of when we think about ad tech and how we consolidated things, and this is what really helps make us thrive. So IQ, which is, kind of our offering to the ad market in a, that helps consolidate and commercialize our entire footprint, whether it's owned and operated, distribution, TVE, SVOD, FAST, it's everything's about scale, and we have the largest premium content scalable option out there today. So IQ Video, is, like I said, Pluto, Paramount Plus, we have TVE, virtual MVPD endpoints. As of first half of 2022, we reach 80 million unique streamers on a given month. So, like I said, you could hardly touch the internet without running into our content in some form or fashion if you're trying to watch, high quality TV like content, in which case almost 90% of it is on a TV glass. Web, desktop is still around. Mobile applications are still important, especially depending on what you're trying to watch. But primarily we are hitting those 50+ inch TVs and giving that TV like experience. And everything we do from an ad tech and process stand flow tries to take that into account as a digital shop. We are TV, just delivered differently, in which case we have to act and behave like we're TV in terms of the user experience you get, the tools we need to do to run advertising at scale. But it's not just quality content, it's a quality experience and impression. Those two things combined are extremely important to us. So, just to give everyone a little bit of a glimpse into, I think I've been at CBS for almost 20 years. The Q4 of 2020 to Q2 of 2021 was the most intense and craziest period of my career. There was so much going on, it was ridiculous. And these are all high ticket, high profile events. We started, and this is how we eventually got to IQ, because as Viacom, CBS merged at late, or we started the merger late 2019, right before COVID kind of took over our lives. Pluto was in its own tech stack, Viacom was its own stack, CBS was its own stack, and everything was independently run to some extent with different teams, different processes, different tech. So we knew going into that we had to unify everything we did from an ad stack to get to the scale, to really grab those those budgets per se, because you can't, we need to be part of every mix, just given we touch everyone. So started off in Q4 2020, we were planning for NFL playoffs. We were already planning for the Super Bowl well in advance of that. We had Paramount Plus coming up, and we're trying to plan our ad stack migration plan. So Q4 was a lot of planning. We're already kind of getting into NFL playoffs at the end of that. As we get into Q1, we are in NFL playoffs. We then quickly go into a Super Bowl in the beginning of February. And I know there's probably not a ton of people that have worked on a Super Bowl, but, having gone through 4 of them, and, it is by far one of the most intense elements a digital programmer goes through to run. It's one of the largest scale events domestically. You have, a very complicated ad element to it, considering how important ads are to a Super Bowl. So nonetheless, January was like, if it's not about the Super Bowl, we'll call you back kind of mentality. And then we had to quickly pivot and trying to do things in conjunction to launching Paramount Plus on March 4th. So we went from a Super Bowl to a launch of our biggest direct-to-consumer SVOD or relaunch of CBS All Access to Paramount Plus, which touched every single app, every unowned and operated. We have distribution of Paramount Plus in the channels, relationships. We had to work with partners. There's a lot going on there. And then, quickly then after, we're into talking about the Masters, which is another large scale, unique event, and March Madness, that little thing. So Q1 was just, if not more insane, because it was time to execute. And then we get into Q2, we have the Masters at the beginning of April, for season finales in general for the TVE side of the business is a very large surge of traffic. We have to make sure things are running right. We have to deliver campaigns, fulfill on those. And then we have the ad server, the migration launch of everything we've worked for from Q4, and then a couple breaks here and there for Super Bowls and whatnot, launched on June 28th with a unified ad server and process to kind of consolidate the three-headed monster into into launching IQ at that point. So very hectic, stressful. I think I might have some grays, that will never go away because of it. Just a little glimpse into, this is just the ad piece of the process. There's so much more that goes on elsewhere, and always give props to any of your ad operation shops and kind of what they have to go through to get to that final, 30 seconds on screen and what that means. It takes a lot, and there's a lot of distractions that go on. And just a little glimpse in terms of how we went from a lot of boxes to we streamlined a bunch of those, and this comes down to, when you think about Adtech, Adtech is one piece of it, but the ad platform is very broad. You have CRM, you have order management, you have audience data, you have the actual ad server. We go from 2 freewheels and a GAM to 1 freewheel. We have programmatic elements that need to get consolidated. Server-side ad insertion software, we consolidated and try to hone in on reducing that impact. Third-party data and automation for sales support for scale. Data warehouse elements. It's not just like, hey, you got to do ad serving and ad serving and figure out a process. You need to get all that data in a central place. You got to normalize it. You got to operationalize data as much as you do the process and the ad server. It's such a huge focus to help us scale and do things correctly. And then of course you got to bill. So we had different billing elements for finance, and we had to consolidate on that. So now we're one unified ad stack. It doesn't matter if you're on Paramount Plus, Pluto, any of our TV authentication apps, and even skinny bundles, whether it's YouTube TV or Hulu or Fubo, or you name it, anywhere there's Paramount content, on-site or off-site, it is all unified. And that is how we get to an 80 million number from a single stack, a single execution, which really helps our sales team thrive and be successful in that we're not having to do 50 different things to execute a campaign. It's one single process for anything in Paramount under the IQ umbrella. So as we think about maintenance of IQ, and I think Jay even kind of touched on this earlier, everything we do is a data-driven decision up and down the organization. We need to tweak our process. We need to change our specs. We need to optimize our ad server or do other things. Data drives that decision always. There's always some piece of data that can help you make a better decision. A big part of what we do, I don't want to say ad tech sucks, because it doesn't, but digital ad tech has its problems and things break. So, pushing alerts of breakage, QoE software, real-time reporting are extremely important. When we say, we're driving a car that has a lot of buttons, that's kind of what we're doing. And we need all this data and alerting to make sure we stay on the road. And you have, strive for 1 hour problems, not 12-hour problems, not 3-week problems, because you're you don't have the data or alerts to help surface those up to all the teams that are needed to run it. Automation is extremely important as well. Salesforce, we're a big Salesforce company. That's very important to us in terms of how we understand our process, and we are looking into and developing AI and RPA processes to even get us further ahead in scale, reduce errors, increase time to execution is a big focus for the operations department in terms of how we are going to maintain and let IQ thrive. Dashboards, again, like just things to look out for in general, as if you were trying to understand your ad tech stack and performance. AI-driven monitoring. There is server-side ad insertion, transcode elements that if your SSAI systems or vendors aren't working correctly, ads don't get on screen. Latency when it comes to either just even episode starting, or even especially even more important in programmatic land. What are your timeout thresholds from an ad server and a DSP side of the house? There's a lot of lessons learned there. IVT, making sure that things aren't getting filtered for whatever reason. As we live in distribution and server side land, there are nuances in that, especially and how that translates to the downstream vendors, and just making sure that those things are running smoothly. Ad decisioning and the cleanliness of that metadata is extremely important. Like I said, we are TV, even though we're digital, we still need to behave and run like we're TV from a quality experience. So understanding the brands that are running, the industries there are, you don't need to see the same ad 10 times in a single episode. That does no one any favors. We really focus in on that element and what we do. It's the content metadata, right? Are you missing SCUDdy? Are you missing cue points? There's a dashboard for almost everything that always needs monitoring to some extent, because there's a lot that can go wrong, unfortunately, in what we do. So I know I just rambled a bunch, but that is it for a quick deck and a glimpse into Paramount in terms of our crazy ad operations and some of the things we've gone through in the past year. Oh, we did of course, we did everything under COVID and all at home, sitting in Brady Bunch boxes all day long. So kudos to everyone that's had to go through it. It was a unique time to do it, but happy to say they all went flawlessly and all worked out. So
okay. So, one of the things I think of when I think about ad tech is there's so many different parts to this, and you just went over your stack and you consolidated a bunch of things actually. When you were thinking about changing over or consolidating because you had all these different properties you were putting together, what was the hardest thing about replacing the vendors? What did you have vendor lock-in? Was there, issues about taking three things and making it into one, or what was the thought process?
Yeah, so I mean, even I think one of the biggest decisions we had to make was the ad decisioning layer, so the ad server. Pluto and Viacom were free will shops, and CBS Interact, or former CBS Interactive, was a Google Ad Manager shop. So that was a long process at with the executives, even at the C level on the digital side of the house, and it's a complicated thing to go through, especially because both those vendors, one is owned by Comcast, one is owned by Google. We have a lot of different touch points with both those companies. Comcast is a cable company. We distribute stuff. We use other software that they've acquired over the years. Google is a huge partner of ours. We do a lot of search. We do a lot of buying. We do a lot of stuff on YouTube, CDN, you name it. There's a lot of different touch points. So that I can't really get into too many details on it. It took a while. It probably took a good 6 months. There's the pure analysis of features, and this does this doesn't, that does that. There's a financial analysis, and then there's clearly a relationship one, in which case we still have a very large, we are a free will shop today from an ad serving or ad decisioning, but we still use Google DAI as a stitcher for half our digital footprint. So they're both still extremely important partners. I don't want to say vendors; they're partners in everything we do, and I think the relationship, it's no hurt feelings per se, and we're using the best of both breeds where we can.
Okay. You also mentioned normalize and operationalize data. So, and I'm going to assume some of that is coming from the ads. I mean, from every different part of the ad stack. So how did it work? I mean, first you went to some new technologies, you consolidated some old technologies. Then you want to make sure that everything is working the way it should. So what are some of the things you had to do when you were normalizing data? Since obviously if something's not, you're not going to have a consistency in your technology.
Yeah. So I think, the ad server logs are some of the most important ones we get that go into our data warehouse. And, whether it's CBS or Viacom, in one way or another, we were already consuming logs from our former ad server, whatever it was, GAM or if it was Freewheel, their old Freewheel network on Viacom side. So we had the expertise internally, and I think Jay hit on this earlier. It's like you could pick the best software and you can mimic everything Paramount or NBC or Disney does from an ad tech standpoint, but the people running it and the expertise of what to do with it is just if not more important. So the leads had that background of we know what the data should look like, and we knew, and having a data governance first approach and how we took the new ad server, it was like basically buying a new car, and we designed it in a way that consistency in the data coming through made it extremely easy to interpret the data and understand as we going from June 27th to June 28th to the 29th. Where were we? We launched. What's the output? And, it wasn't perfect. There were holes and things that got missed. But I think the fact that we had that sound data infrastructure in place, we knew what the logs were, the tables were ready, we had all those things in place. We were quickly able to identify things that were missed or things that didn't necessarily transition so well, or was missing this data point or that. And that is what really made us succeed in a very short and condensed time frame for a launch, and being able to recover from such a change in days, not weeks and months and or a year, from other horror stories I've heard, as people have done ad server migrations.
Okay.
That really helped us.
Now, okay, so you mentioned normalizing data, you mentioned the logs. What's the most popular data? Because obviously I'm not there. Is it the ads watched? Is it the percentage of the ads? What kind of things are you catching from your logs that I need to know about?
We capture everything. That's the beauty of it.
What's important?
What's important? As we think about our supply, IQ is based on, every single endpoint, every single app, on-site, off-site, doesn't matter. It's all about getting it all to one place so we can make intelligent ad decisions across everything we have from a demand standpoint. Direct IO, programmatic guarantee, sales PMPs, indirect lanes, is to get it all into one place. And one of the most important things that we look at is our overall supply. So looking at the individual ads that run are important, and we definitely look at that, but understanding this endpoint, Paramount Plus on Roku, on this platform, how is its supply health doing at this point? Is it in normal range? Is it like, oh, we had a big dip today, why did we have a big dip, and things like, so I think having a solid grasp of the overarching supply and hundreds of endpoints and different apps is probably the most important thing, because from there you can then be like, okay, if the supply is sound and everything's working, then we can go one level deeper and being like, okay, our completion rate's good, or is the frequency of ads correct, or whatnot. But if the supply is broken, everything else below it is screwed just as much.
Okay, all right. We talked on our planning call about viewing patterns for subscription versus ad-supported content. Do you want to kind of fill us in a little bit on whether viewers are different or whether they are the same?
They are more or less the same. I think I did ask around before this. I think this all comes down to choice for users, and that's why there's a price difference. Why they come to Paramount Plus and what they're watching, whether or not they're in our premium tier or essential tier, they all come to watch 1883 or Halo or Picard or a UEFA match. It just comes down, their expectations going into it, knowing that there'll be ads or not ads, really isn't dictating, what they consume or how they consume it.
Okay. So what you're saying though is that people, they'll watch about the same amount of time if it's ad supported versus a non-ad supported.
Yep. They want to, again, I think it all comes down to, the quality of your content. They're only going to want to watch it if it's worth watching, whether ads are irrelevant in that. If you don't have great content, then people aren't going to want to watch it for long periods of time to begin with.
Okay. We have a couple questions in the Q&A box here, and I'll read one of them. We can see if it's relevant to you. Andy Rosen writes, you control the sentiment data for most of your shows. Will you let FreeWheel develop its context effective targeting, or will you develop your own targeting intelligence accelerators?
Gotcha. So we have an AI and machine learning team internally, and we've looked at this for years in terms of scoring content for sentiment. Whether it's a full episode of a drama or a comedy, or CBS News, CBS Sports, it doesn't matter. How we then take that data and kind of the strategy behind it from an ad offering is, isn't necessarily out there for us right now. And, there's still some work to be done on the outputs we even get from that, from those processes. So we're not there yet, but we're still looking at it. Probably would be something we do in-house, but if FreeWheel built something that made it that much easier for us, we'll always take a look at that.
Okay, so contextual maybe, but personalization absolutely.
So contextual we already do that. And then in terms of personalizing it, I guess if it's personalizing the content decisions or the content recommendations you see.
No, you're the ad guy. We're talking ads.
We're talking about ads.
We are.
Yes, we are. Again, we haven't necessarily gotten to the point where we have an official, how are we going to use this data to personalize ads? Because there's thousands of there's thousands of potential variables to personalize an ad. Just because it's there might not necessarily make sense to use, or the scale of it makes it tough to do it just as much. If there's a very small data point that makes sense to personalize, but you can only do it for 10 out of 80 million people, it's probably not worth going down that path. Okay,
so definitely trade-off. One of the other things that both you and I have talked about, as well as I've talked to other ad tech vendors about, is, when I think about kind of what the future is going to be in ad tech, the digital environment has done so much that is now available for the broadcast environment to look at. I mean, because in digital you can already personalize or you can already target. Is this something that broadcast is going to, obviously now people are saying that addressable is the future for advertising, but what's the best thing that digital is able to give to broadcast to make broadcast a better ad environment?
Gotcha. So the good news is, and I say broadcast cable, I'm just going to kind of merge them together. There are differences between the two, but we'll just treat as one. We already do it. We already have live linear addressable at Paramount with a bunch of our MVPD partners. So there are spots today that are using data to deliver either a much stronger optimized show targeting, depending on what you're trying to do, or if it is, IP powered, endpoints, and there's still a difference between the two. Some of them are just, you don't have that individual household decisioning, but we can definitely do better planning on some of the more one-to-many, but on the one-to-ones, we're using those data, those very specific data segments today in live linear. So it's here, and I think there's a lot of industry-led efforts to kind of scale it up and get it to get it even more. So Viacom had a business unit called Vantage, which still exists, and they've pioneered a lot of this stuff years ago, and did these relationships. But there are other industry groups tackling this. There's Project OR, which is a smart TV focused, watermarking using IAB VAST protocols, tracking and elements. So it looks a lot more like digital, but it does play out in a live linear approach. You have on addressable with the Canoe folks in terms of how when you think about set-top box land, how do you make that is a one-to-one element? And in live linear, I know there's a couple programmers that are live there. So it's here. I think as we as over time things migrate from a traditional everyone sees the same ad to every single ad is individualized, it's going to take a long time. There's a lot of hardware that needs to get updated. There's a lot of TV sets that can't do any of this stuff. There's a lot of the ecosystem at the actual the broadcast endpoints, the stations that need upgrading. This is a long road to getting to a place where every single ad is addressable or dynamic. I want to say a dynamic, whether it's using data or time or content targeting. We've got a long road before it all changes. So we're going to be living in and both have a place too. There's certain sports events that you don't need to do one-to-one addressable stuff, like a Super Bowl. That is not you're probably the kind of event or the sponsorship elements where it's like, I want everyone to see the spot. In which case you don't have to do stuff that.
Okay, so say you're personalizing on digital, although I have other questions for you, but I want to just touch on this for a second. You're personalizing on digital. It's not the Super Bowl because you're not essentially serving one ad to a lot of people, but you're serving a lot of different ads to a lot of people. What's the acceptable latency for you? Is there acceptable latency?
No,
No.
no. There's not so there's if it's a live event, latency is one of the number one enemies out there in digital land as you do in dynamic decisioning. So there are methods to mitigate that. I think prefetching is a term that is important in live, especially live with scale. There's different ends of the spectrum of there's 5,000 people or 1,000 people watching this event. That doesn't tax the ad tech ecosystem hundreds of thousands or millions of people, the most simplest of things we do break still in ad tech. And and it's the concept of when you go to break and you have a SCUDdy marker, it says it's time to go to break and it's 2 minutes of ads. Do you hit ad tech all at once and it's like hitting someone over the head with a sledgehammer? Or do you call it, a minute in advance or 2 minutes in advance, knowing a trigger is coming, and you kind of give the systems more time and, to respond and do their things. And you spread out the load a little bit in that form of matter. And then, ad tech in general works much better when it's spread versus a condensed factor. And, in a big scale event like a Super Bowl, there's a ton of testing ahead of time where we're simulating load and looking at performance of vendors and who will be allowed, who isn't allowed, who has the capacity to handle millions of concurrence at any given point. We absolutely do that exercise before the game.
You read my mind, because I was going to say, how do you load test
Yeah.
a huge event like that? Okay, so you're load testing it. You also said occasionally things break. What breaks the most often?
Everything breaks.
Everything breaks.
Everything breaks. It's nothing in digital is 100%. I think in ad tech,
Well, how does that make you sleep at night if nothing is 100% and everything breaks?
You've seen my garage. It has a lot of alcohol in it. Like there's usually safety nets, and I think as we design our ecosystems there's fallbacks, there's failovers. There's a reason why we have a process. Even onboarding vendors and who we allow in our ecosystem. This stuff is all vetted. But what breaks? I mean, latency is always a never-ending challenge. Especially on live high concurrence stuff. You get into blank VAS tags. People still to this day think FLV is a video format that is acceptable in digital advertising. Flash went away how many years ago? It still comes up. VPaid, even though it's been deprecated by the IAB, is still showing up in places, and those things cause problems. Audio levels, they're too loud, they're too soft. We have to think about how do we normalize audio at scale, because last thing you want is you're watching, and this personally happened to me years and years ago, and this is when we, after that, we're like, all right, we have a new rule and a new spec, is you don't want to be watching a program and then the ad is 50 times louder, and then it wakes up your 6-month-old, and then you don't get to watch it anymore. So now we have an audio spec. And again, acting like TV. We review ads before they go live. We check their specs. We do that, and we do that at scale. So
I was going to say, is that are you using technology to check the ads, or are you actually eyeballing it?
A little we use technology and have partnerships in place to check the core specs of it, is your bit rate, your file size, your audio levels, your frame rates, interlace frames. We have those core elements. Right. And then we also have, you still the operations team still watches ads. We still make sure there's not cursing or anything inappropriate. There is some, the whole standards and practices is important. Even though we're digital, it's important to you don't want to serve an inappropriate ad in certain types of content. As Paramount, we are a big kids supplier of inventory with Nick and Nick Jr. Even more sensitivity and processes and protections in every layer of our ed tech stack to make sure you don't get an inappropriate ad, or from a COPA standpoint, we don't have tracking that you're not supposed to have, and those elements. So I mean, there's a lot that goes into those humans will never go away. They're very important, and we supplement or complement what the the folks do with technology, with reporting, to make it from a 5-minute process to a 1-minute process. And the two will always complement each other.
All right, we have so many different questions here. We're not going to get to all of them, but let me hit up a few. Ashok Nadu writes, how would selection criteria work where you have multiple advertisers targeting the same audience segment? Which advertiser would get preference? I'm thinking this is a dollars and cents thing, but what do you?
I wouldn't say preference isn't the right way. And you have to think about it is if you have a segment, and this comes back to our user experience and being like TV. You have Nadine, you're in market to buy a Maserati. You're a Glenderry lead, and we know who you are. However, we have a data segment that says that, but Maserati or Ferrari, and you have all the high-end autos that want to get an ad to you to persuade you to buy a car. Mm-hmm. When you're watching an episode, or you're watching CBS News Digital, or whatever you're watching on Paramount, you don't just get one ad, you get a full episode of ads. So while we might have 5 different autos trying to convince you to buy their product, there's 5 different breaks to potentially land each of them in. We don't want to serve Ferrari and Maserati same break, but from break 1 to break 2, and we don't want to serve you the Maserati ad 5 times in an episode. So with some of our user experience policies and settings, we actually are able to spread out a single audience segment. While it might be niche and sought after, there can be multiple clients running at the same time. And this is where the ad server, ad decision system, FreeWheel in our case, that's their job to make sure to figure out kind of how to do the actual ad selection, but we provide inputs to not hammer people with the same ad over and over and over again, and that facilitates multiple advertisers being able to purchase the same segment.
Okay, and I think I did notice it getting better when I was doing a bit of research, which for me, research meant watching everything. Okay, so we've got a few more questions here, and let's try to get to at least one more. Can you talk a bit more about audience data services, the type of info you're using from them, and how that fits into what you were just talking about? I'm not sure exactly what you were talking about because this came in at 10:51, which is actually just now. Okay.
Just now.
5 minutes ago, what you were talking about.
Audience data services. So in order to, and this comes down to, I think, how we facilitate identity. Because identity is what we, one part of audience is, what is your privacy safe identifier that we can, we have our own first party data. So we in some cases, we know emails because of Paramount Plus and it's a subscription product, or we know what someone is potentially consuming across the owned and operated landscape of Paramount. You go from CBS News to Pluto, CBS Sports. Our first party data on what you're watching is important, but we also partner and have access to third party data sources. All privacy safe, using advertiser IDs and whatnot across all the different device types to kind of be able to facilitate that targeting on site, off site. That's kind of and it plays a role in part of our our ad offering. Is audience targeting is something, but contextual targeting is just as important, or geo targeting potentially, or time of day, day of week. There's a lot of different targeting options out there that we offer.
Okay. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, like really running out of time. Hopefully we talk again about this because there's so many more questions we have, Jared. And I think to normalize everything, I'll just say this was a good talk. I learned some stuff. And Eric, I know you want to come back and take us away. Unfortunately,
I have to, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah, that was great. And yes, could have gone on for another hour probably if we'd wanted to. Thanks so much, Jared, for joining us. And thanks, Nadine, for doing such a great job with the moderation. Our Amazon gift card winner for this session is Alicia Clark. So Alicia, watch your email next week for information from us about that gift card. Again, thanks to Jared, thanks to Nadine, and thanks to Jay from Theorem. If you want to learn a little bit more about Theorem, as I mentioned earlier, Brad Yawn from Theorem will be joining us at 4 p.m. Eastern for Nadine's panel, Rethinking Your OTT Workflow, along with speakers from Knowledge Network, Fandango/Voodoo, and Globo. But the next session will be at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and that will be a Tech Talk presentation from Teradek about 4K HDR streaming. So we hope to see you again. Thanks again.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Great. Thank you.